Dana White is getting his hands on the sport of boxing, and a lot of boxing fans, mainly boxers themselves, are a little bit concerned because they want to make a lot of money, and Dana White has obviously been proclaimed as the guy who doesn't pay his fighters, who shortcuts them and doesn't really give them the compensation that they deserve, even when it comes to insurance. He just kind of screws their fighters, you know, when talking about the UFC, and if he brings that energy to boxing, a lot of boxers are concerned about how that would go. Specifically, Ryan Garcia has talked about it. Terrence Crawford has talked about how, you know, he likes the UFC, but ultimately MMA fighters don't make nearly as much as the boxers make. He said that on the Pound for Pound podcast with Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo. And, you know, it was an interesting podcast, and Crawford was saying that MMA fighters, they just don't make the same amount of money. Usman was trying to defend MMA fighters, saying that, you know, in the UFC, you know, in their debuts, fighters make good money, but boxing is just different. Boxing, you know, the big conversation and the big debate is making big fights happen versus, you know, getting the money, right? Because the dilemma is the UFC, they make big fights happen, but they kind of shortchange their fighters, honestly. Yeah, they're getting paid, but in boxing, when the best fight the best, ultimately it's not as common as it is in the UFC, but when it does happen, they're getting paid a lot. So that's the trade-off ultimately. It's either you can have a lot of money or you fight the best. You know, getting both is difficult to do because when you're, you know, allowing a big fight to marinate and you're giving it time to grow, more interest, more people are marketing it, and ultimately more people have their eyeballs set on the fight, they're asking for the fight. The more time that goes by, you know, that's more money, that's more pay-per-view sales in the future. But if you make a big fight happen as soon as, you know, the fans ask for it, then maybe there's a good chance that, you know, these fighters aren't going to get paid. And that's the dilemma between the UFC and boxing, and that's why a lot of boxers are concerned with Dana White stepping into boxing, because they don't want to get shortchanged. They don't want to get screwed and underpaid because they know how difficult it is. Boxing's been a sport where guys like Floyd Mayweather have made it so interesting to make a lot of money, you know, to provide for their families and get even more crazy amounts of money in pay-per-view sales. But that comes with time, right? That doesn't just happen overnight. Floyd Mayweather was, you know, a great prospect. He was an Olympian, and he stepped into the sport of boxing being that talent that, you know, was supposed to be the next Sugar Ray Leonard, and he had the talk of Muhammad Ali. So that he had the full package, honestly, Floyd Mayweather, but that came along with building fighters, building himself to the point where he felt comfortable fighting the best. It's not just like, okay, this guy gets in the UFC, he has some great performances, but he's not really fighting anybody, and then you put him in there with the best, and then all of a sudden, he's not a star. You know, it's about building these fights and building these fighters. That's the difference between the UFC and boxing. Yeah, the UFC gives these younger guys who kind of just started their careers big opportunities to fight the best, but sometimes, you know, they don't allow them to build, so the fight isn't as competitive as it could be. It's not as exciting as it could be, and more importantly, you're losing all marketability when you're throwing these stars in with, you know, guys they don't necessarily need to be fighting just yet. And in the sport of boxing, the dilemma is, well, we're not getting the best fighting the best, but for the best to fight the best, they also deserve to get compensated. And when it takes more time to make a big fight, like take Crawford and Spence, take Pacquiao and Floyd, those fights took time, but they maximize that financial outcome. The UFC doesn't do that as much as boxing does, and that's the reason why you see a lot of fighters not getting paid. It's because, yeah, they're throwing each other in with the best MMA fighters in the world in the UFC, but a lot of those fights are too green. They're too early to be made, and that's why they're not even maximizing the potential of the company in the long run, because they're not building stars. They're not building the next Conor McGregor. They're just throwing them in there with whoever, and that's why you see, you know, your favorite stars, Israel Adesanya, Sean O'Malley, kind of fade away, because ultimately they're very exciting and very talented fighters, but putting them in there with everybody, you know, so quickly, and, you know, making whatever fights are out there, putting them in there with whoever is available, causes these kinds of situations. In boxing, you don't get that. You get these guys, you know, training for big fights when they get to a point where, you know, they're already past that rookie and prospect kind of stage of their careers, and then they make big fights happen. So that's the difference. You know, a lot of boxers just want Dana White to pay, you know, the same way that boxing has been getting paid. You know, make sure that they understand the process and the layout, the format of, you know, building a star, building a big pay-per-view event, and making sure that fighters are compensated properly and not underpaid. So let me know down below what you guys think about Dana White joining the sport of boxing. Those are my thoughts, but thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch you guys on the next NAS Boxing video. Peace.